Did you know that emotional bankruptcy can actually hurt you in leadership? You're probably so good at tracking deadlines, budgets, performance reviews, client expectations, team results, even everybody else's emotions. You've even internalized your company's finances. You know exactly where every dollar goes. But if somebody asked you how you manage your emotional energy, you know that you'd struggle to get the right answer. The fact is, you can be high performing and still be running an emotional deficit. And in this video, we are going to look at how to measure your emotional ROI to avoid burnout, especially if you're in a leadership role. And I'll be walking you through a step-by-step 5-part framework on how to audit your energy to stop low return emotional labor and avoid the kind of burnout that sneaks up on you when you're actually doing everything right. Hi, welcome back to my channel, and if we are crossing paths for the very first time, my name is Nancy. I'm a former airline professional turned workplace leadership strategist and mentor, and I've equally authored books that are grounded in leadership, customer experience, and their greater impact on your bottom line. These are elements that have shaped my entire professional trajectory, and in a good way, I must say. So on this platform, you'll mostly find me discussing topics centered on leadership, professional growth, career advancement, and how to navigate them, while protecting your mental and emotional well-being. So if you're in or you aspire to take up a leadership role soon, I strongly believe that my kind of content will resonate with you. Kindly consider subscribing. Press that notifications button on your screen and you'll be receiving timely updates whenever I release a new video. And thank you so much for joining and growing this community. Leadership is not always comfortable, and by now you've probably noticed that emotional energy is one of your most valuable assets. Every high pressure decision you make carries a hidden tax on your staying power in that office, in that organization. So whatever you do, you want to ensure that your career success does not cost you your soul. Your empathy has value, your attention, your calm, your ability to listen, to absorb pressure, to make decisions, to manage conflict, even to hold the room together. All that has value. And if you keep spending that energy without measuring the returns, you may reach your goals, yes, but you'll arrive there maxed out. So by the end of this video, you'll be able to identify which parts of your leadership role are giving you the right kind of energy, which parts are quietly draining you, and how to make smarter emotional investments before you reach burnout. And I want to give you a new way to think about burnout prevention, something that answers that deep-seated question: where is your emotional energy going and what is it giving you back? That is the definition of emotional ROI, return on emotional investment. So if you're ready to start calculating your emotional ROI, let's dive in. We're going to start with part 1, which is the emotional P&L statement or profit and loss statement. In business, a P&L statement is going to show you profits and losses. It tells you what's coming in, and what's going out, and whether the business is sustainable. But if you're in a leadership role, it's very easy to track every external performance metric while ignoring your internal one. The quarterly targets by heart. You know what your higher ups expect of you. You know what your clients need from you. You're very good with the numbers, the reports, the meetings, the deliverables in general. But the biggest struggle is with that, with the state of your own emotional account. Burnout often happens when your emotional outputs are higher than your emotional inputs, and for a very long time. Those are the moments when, when you're giving more patience than you're recovering, when you're giving more reassurance than you're receiving, more empathy than your nervous system can process. You're even giving out more availability than your actual capacity allows. And on the outside, this looks like leadership, but internally, it's actually depletion. Your emotional P&L has two sides. The first side is emotional output, what I call the energy expenses. And this includes anything that requires emotional effort from you. I'm talking about handling conflicts, making difficult decisions, managing a disappointed team member, staying calm in a tense meeting, supporting someone through a crisis, absorbing pressure from senior leadership, leading your teams through seasons of uncertainty, being that person who keeps everybody else grounded. And then the second side is emotional input, what I call the energy gains or the revenue. And this is what restores you. Things like clarity, recovery time, those hearty, honest conversations, respectful collaboration, a sense of progress, a calm morning, a supportive friend in your corner, a meeting that actually ends with a decision, a team member who takes ownership, instead of just handing the anxiety back to you. And you're going to notice that many leaders have a very high emotional output and a very low emotional input. And in that state, it's very, very easy to always be tired because you're constantly operating at an emotional loss. And if your emotional account is always in deficit, you're going to start paying with things that you cannot easily replace. Things like your patience, your creativity, confidence, your health, your joy, your ability to be present, to care without resentment. Those are the moments when leadership is going to start feeling heavy because you're trying to lead, but from an account that is already overdrawn, already depleted. So to mitigate this, here's something that you can start doing starting today. Just at the end of your day, ask yourself, what did today cost me emotionally? Was the day energizing, like on a scale of 1 to 5, 5 being the most energizing? Was it draining? Was it mixed? Which interaction or, tete-a-tete stayed with me longer than it should have? Which meeting took more from me than it gave back? Where did I feel like I was leading? Where did I feel like I was emotionally managing everybody else? That is you taking stock of your emotional P&L. And once you see it, you're going to notice that even what you consider invisible actually costs something and it carries weight. Part 2, the empathy yield analysis. I personally believe that empathy is one of the most powerful leadership skills that you can have, but unmanaged empathy can become one of the fastest roads to burnout. And especially if you've been praised in the past for being the most understanding, supportive, approachable, emotionally intelligent, so easy to talk to person. All these are awesome qualities, but the truth is not every emotional demand deserves the same emotional investment. Some empathy creates trust, some creates dependency, some helps people to grow, some teaches people that your energy is always available, some strengthens the team. And that is why it's very important to measure the yield. You want the way you care, the way you show empathy to actually create a healthy return. Strategic empathy has a return. It's going to help someone to take ownership. It's going to build that psychological safety. It's going to give clarity, strengthen trust. It's going to help the team to move forward. It's going to allow people to feel seen without making you responsible for carrying everything. Then overextended empathy comes at a cost. It's going to keep you in conversations that just go nowhere. It makes you responsible for emotions that are not yours to manage, not yours to carry. It turns every small issue into your personal assignment. It might even create a dynamic where people bring you problems, but they don't take ownership. So this leaves you needed but drained. And there's a difference between being emotionally available and being impactful. You can be constantly available and not actually effective. You can be highly responsive and still not be respected. You can't be that person that everybody comes to and still not be the person whose boundaries are honored. So I want to give you a very practical way to measure empathy ROI. Like after a support conversation, just ask yourself these 3 questions. Number 1, did this conversation create clarity? Number 2, did it create ownership? Number 3, did it move something forward? And if the answer is yes, then that was probably a high yield empathy. If the answer is no, then you simply absorb the emotion while the other person left without responsibility, and that may have actually been a low return emotional labor. A good example, just imagine a team member comes to you so overwhelmed about a deadline. Strategic empathy is going to sound like, I can see that this feels heavy. Let's clarify what is actually urgent, what kind of support you need from me, and what next steps you can own today. That is empathy with structure. But overextended empathy, sounds like, oh no, honestly, I completely understand. Let me just take a look at it. Let me try to fix this. I'll call the client for you ASAP, Let me take it from here. That may feel helpful in the moment, but if it keeps repeating every single week, you're not leading. You're actually becoming the emotional shock absorber, and shock absorbers do wear out. So yours in this case is to aim for strategic empathy from the get-go. You can actually care without caring. You can listen without rescuing. You can actually validate without volunteering your entire nervous system. And that's what separates empathy as a leadership asset and empathy as a burnout pattern. And then this brings us to part 3, where we map out your energy topography. Just imagine your regular work day like a map. And on this map, there are places, there are destinations that give you energy. There are some places that actually use your energy. And then there are places that quietly drain the life out of you in the name of, that's just the call of the job, the order of the day. That's what comes with the job. I'm talking about the recurring meetings, the conversations, tasks, even the people that shape your emotional landscape. This is your energy topography. And if you don't map it right, it's actually you might find yourself blaming yourself for being so tired when your calendar is the real emotional obstacle. Here's a typical day scenario. You start with back-to-back meetings. One meeting has no clear agenda. Another meeting is full of tension that nobody wants to name, and then a message comes through to your phone that is marked urgent, but it's actually just poor planning disguised as urgency. And before midday, you remember that you have to give feedback to someone who takes everything personally. Your boss is also on your neck, equally asking for an update, but nothing is clear. The tone is very vague, And when you finally get 1 hour to do deep work, your brain is still processing the 5 different emotional situations. Come 5 p.m., you've technically worked all day, but you have not had one clean hour where your mind was fully yours. That is emotional fragmentation, and it can be exhausting. So here's an exercise that you can actually try to carry out to navigate emotional fragmentation. Just for 1 week, map out your recurring leadership activities into 3 categories. The first category, energy vampires, and these are the interactions that consistently leave you drained, tense, resentful, or even mentally cluttered. They may be those vague meetings, unresolved conflicts, emotionally demanding colleagues, constant interruptions, or even the tasks that require you to perform calm while internally you're just feeling stretched. And then the second category, the energy neutrals, and these are the necessary parts of leadership. They don't necessarily energize you, but they don't necessarily drain you when they're well managed. I'm thinking, regular updates, the operational check-ins, the simple approvals, routine decisions. And then the third category, the energy catalysts. And these are the moments that create momentum, clarity, confidence, connection, or meaning. I'm talking about, the strategic conversations, mentoring someone who actually takes action, solving a complex problem, preparing for a presentation that matters to your growth, writing a vision, having a clean, honest conversation, seeing your team grow. Sometimes burnout happens because your week has too many energy vampires and not enough energy catalysts. You may be busy, yes, but more importantly, you may be emotionally misallocated. You're spending your best energy on the lowest return parts of your leadership. An example, maybe your clearest thinking happens in the mornings, but your mornings are filled with low value check-ins, or maybe your emotional energy is highest on Mondays, but Monday is the one day when everybody unloads problems on you. Maybe your most creative time is blocked by meetings that could have just been emails, voice notes, or even just shared documents. Or maybe the one project that would have actually moved your leadership forward keeps getting pushed to Friday afternoons when your mind is already, planning that weekend barbecue. That is poor emotional energy design, And the call here is on you to start asking yourself, how do I design a week that does not constantly extract from me? Recovery can be built into structure, just the structure of your leadership. And that might mean, no overwhelming conversations right before a high stakes decision, or not scheduling a back-to-back conflict heavy conversations. It might also mean, just creating a buffer after leadership meetings where you know that you will need time to process, or even just moving strategic work to the part of the day, the part of the week where your mind is actually sharp. This is effective energy management. This brings us to part 4, mitigating decision-making debt. This is one of the most important parts of emotional ROI because every decision costs something. Some decisions are small, like what should I reply, should I attend this meeting or not, should I approve this, should I follow up now or later. But other decisions are heavy, like, should I challenge this strategy, should I escalate this issue, how do I give this person a difficult feedback, should I ask for more support from my higher ups, should I accept this promotion that is coming my way, should I leave this organization. The problem is that when you are emotionally fatigued, your decision quality is going to be compromised. You will become more reactive, more avoidant, more people pleasing, more impatient, more risk averse, more likely to say yes just to end a conversation, even more likely to say no just from irritation instead of clarity. This is decision making depth, and it is exactly what happens when emotional fatigue accumulates and starts charging interest. You're making decisions but from survival mode. So you become so hard on yourself, like, why am I suddenly this indecisive? Why am I just snapping at everybody around me? Why am I avoiding conversations that I normally handle well? Why do I feel like I'm so detached? There's nothing wrong with your character. Maybe your emotional reserves are below the safety line. And when that's the case, when that's your state, it's safer to pause before you make expensive decisions from a depleted state. And a simple framework that you can try even starting today, before making a big high impact decision, just check your internal safety margin. Like, ask yourself, am I physically tired, emotionally activated? Am I trying to prove something to someone? Am I afraid of disappointing someone? Am I making this decision to move forward, or is it just to make the pressure stop? And that last question is very powerful, because many burnout decisions are actually escape routes. You want to say yes because you want that discomfort to end, or you say no because you are overwhelmed, or you delay because you're emotionally overloaded, you over explain because you are anxious, or even you overcommit because you want to remain being seen as the most capable. So the next time you have a high stakes decision and you feel internally depleted, give yourself a pause protocol, and you can say something like, I want to give this proper thought, so I'll come back to you tomorrow. Or, this deserves a clearer answer. I don't want to rush anything. Or, let me review the implications before I confirm anything to you. That pause is leadership protection, and it's going to help you know when your internal state is not at the right place from which to make an external commitment. And when you normalize, these energy-based boundaries, you're also showing your team members that sustainable performance actually matters, that leadership is about being responsibly present. Burnout is beyond personal problem. Sometimes it's actually a decision problem, or a culture problem, a boundary problem. We reward, the overfunctioning problem. So when you protect your decision-making capacity, you're actually modeling a more sustainable standard of leadership for your team members. Part 5, scaling sustainable ascent. The goal of measuring your emotional ROI is not to dilute your sense of ambition. You want your ambition to actually have a sustainable foundation. And I personally believe that success that requires you to abandon yourself is not leadership growth. It's actually emotional over leverage. And you probably know this feeling, you get that promotion, but you lose your peace of mind. You build the reputation, but you lose your ability to switch off. You become very visible, but you also become more emotionally exposed. You become needed, but you also become depleted. And at some point, you just find yourself asking, is this version of success, this version of growth actually returning anything to me? Not just to the company, not to the team members, not to the project, not even to everybody else, to you. What is this role giving back to your life? Is it giving you confidence, meaning, options, wisdom, stronger boundaries, more self-trust? Or is it giving you tension, resentment, exhaustion, and a nervous system that you cannot even talk about in public? A reinvestment strategy is going to come in handy at a point like this, because when you recover emotional energy, you want to spend it on high value, high return leadership. Those, like the strategic thinking, innovation, mentoring, the right people, building visibility, strengthening your network, for your health, for your relationships, for your actual life. The point of protecting your energy is to have enough of yourself left to build the kind of future that you say you want. So your emotional ROI roadmap has 3 parts. The first one, just reduce emotional leakage, identify where your energy is being drained without meaningful return. And then second, redirect emotional investment, just put more of your best attention into the people, the projects, the decisions that actually create growth. Then number 3, reinvest in recovery. Recovery, you want to look at recovery as a leadership function, not as a reward for collapsing. You're still growing, you're still leading, you're still stretching, you're still building influence, you're still making impact, but you're no longer confusing depletion with dedication. And that is the identity shift. Your old leadership identity would say, I prove my value by how much I can carry. Your new leadership identity should say, I protect my capacity because my leadership depends on it. Your old identity would probably say, if people need me, I must be available. The new leadership identity should say, my presence is most powerful when it is intentional, And you're going to find that you start showing up better when you know that, you can be empathetic without abandoning yourself. You can be ambitious without becoming emotionally bankrupt. You can measure not only what you achieve, but what the achievement costs. Your career should stretch you. It should challenge you. It should grow you, but it should not consume you. So as a quick recap, if you want to measure your emotional ROI and avoid leadership burnout, you are going to start with these 5 steps. Step number 1, create your emotional P&L statement. Notice what your leadership is costing you emotionally and what is replenishing you. And then number 2, analyze your empathy yield. You want to ask whether your emotional support is creating clarity and ownership or just draining you. Number 3, map your energy topography. Identify the meetings, the people, tasks, and patterns that act as energy vampires, energy neutrals, or energy catalysts. Number 4, mitigate decision-making debt. You do not want to make expensive leadership decisions from an emotionally depleted state. And then at number 5, scale sustainable ascent. Use your recovered energy for strategic growth, innovation, visibility, and recovery, not just more overextension. Your emotional energy is not a soft tissue. It is leadership infrastructure. And when you learn to measure it, to protect it, to invest it wisely, you're going to become more sustainable, more discerning, more grounded, more strategic, and far less available for the kind of leadership that just looks impressive on paper but feels very empty. If you received value from this video, I'd really love to know what stood out to you the most. And then if this kind of content resonates with you, kindly consider subscribing if you haven't already, and share it with a friend or two who stand to benefit also from this content. And then take a moment, or take a few minutes and have a look at the video on your screen on how self-care fuels career advancement. It actually goes hand in hand with this video, and it will shed light on some of the things that we've discussed. Thank you so much for your company, and see you on the next one. Bye.